Welcome to Unstoppable at Craig, where we pull back the curtain on what makes healthy workplace cultures click and what happens when people are empowered to expand the boundaries of what is possible. We'll explore the perspectives of employees and leaders who have carte blanche to speak their truths, tell their stories, and unlock uncommon ways of approaching challenges. I'm Dr. Jandel Allen Davis, CEO and President of Craig Hospital, a world-renowned rehabilitation hospital that exclusively specializes in the neurorehabilitation and research of patients with spinal cord and brain injury. Join me as we learn from people who love what they do and what happens when fear doesn't stifle innovation. As part of our ongoing mission to explore resilience, innovation, and the power of community, over the next few episodes, we'll be sitting down with city managers to discuss a topic that affects us all: creating accessible cities. And accessibility isn't just about ramps and elevators. It's about designing spaces and systems that allow everyone to participate fully in the life of a community. From transportation and housing to parks and public services, there are countless ways to make cities more inclusive and empowering for all people of all abilities. So we're thrilled to bring you these conversations, and we hope they inspire you to think about how we can all contribute to building a more inclusive world. Back in March of 2024, we had the privilege of recording an episode with Mike Miller, the city manager of Muskogee, Oklahoma. Since that recording, Mike has achieved a significant milestone. He's been awarded the International City and County Management Association Credentialed Manager certification, a rare and prestigious honor that reflects his exceptional commitment to public service and professional excellence. But this wonderful news is accompanied by some bittersweet news that I want to share, as it was recently announced that Mike will be stepping down from his role as city manager, effective at the start of the new year. After nearly 9 years of dedicated service to the city of Muskogee, Mike will be moving on to new opportunities. And while it's undoubtedly a sad day for the Muskogee community, it's also a moment to reflect on and celebrate the indelible impact Mike has had during his tenure. We wish him nothing but success and happiness in his future endeavors. So without further ado, let's get started with today's episode. I don't know if you know Judy Heumann. Judy Heumann is not singularly, but she's one of the great leaders that got the American Disabilities Act passed in 1990, and she passed last year. So she is a hero in the disability community. And one of the things that she said is that part of the problems that we tend to think of equality, that it's about treating everyone the same, when it really isn't. It is about equity. It's about fairness, and it's about equity of access, which was certainly obviously at the core of what the ADA is about. I also say that the Americans with Disabilities Act is necessary but hardly sufficient, that we've got miles to go, and you would know that better than many, Mike. And I am so thrilled and honored to get a chance to talk with Mike Miller, who has many connections to this work that he'll talk about, but he is the city manager of Muskogee, Oklahoma, and has been doing that for over 7 years. But there's other really cool things that you may want to share. So I'm just going to open up to you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and how it is that you and I get to hang together and talk about this.
Well, first, very generous of you to make the offer. I love to meet interesting people, and we've already had a brief conversation and got to know people and talk about mutual acquaintances, and what a small world it really is.
It really is.
And so I grew up in Oklahoma. My wife is named Holly Rosser Miller, and she's from Texas. And we have spent the last 24 years in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Both of us grew up in much larger towns, and we didn't ever anticipate living in a community Muskogee size. It's about 40,000 citizens in Muskogee. But when we lived in Muskogee, it was because I was working for a Native American tribe, the Cherokee Nation, which was headquartered about 20 miles away. And I loved working there, but it was a place of convenience. So we moved to Muskogee, this small town. It seems small, but it really became home for us. It's really a place of community there where people get along. They pull together to make the community a better place. And it has its flaws like every community, but it's got so much going for it. And we really fell in love with it. So we've lived there for about 25 years. I didn't really ever work in Muskogee. I always commuted other places until I got the opportunity to work for the city of Muskogee. And what we do there and what we like to say is we get to make our neighbors' lives better every day.
Oh.
And
beautiful.
yeah, so what we mean by that is, pardon me, I was an English major in college, which of course prepares you for lots of things.
My God. We have a daughter who's one of those, and I actually would agree. But
yes, I agree too.
carry on.
I am a strong believer. We can get off on that tangent in the humanities, making you a better person overall. But the words in that phrase are important. Making, it's an action verb. Something doesn't happen. You don't make something unless you're doing it, and you take a positive, proactive action. Our neighbors, we're talking about us together, neighbors, the people around us, make our neighbors' lives better every day. And so that's what we get to do. And there's lots of ways that we get to do it working for the city. And it's a lot of things that people take for granted. So you expect that the water comes into your house through the faucet and that it leaves however it leaves down the drain, and you want it to leave efficiently and all those things, and that the police come when they're called, and the firefighters come when they're called, and that the streets get you where you need to go, and the trash gets picked up. And so there's a lot of things that we take for granted, and people don't always say, oh, I'm sure glad that worked right 100% of the time or 99.9% of the time. So that's one of the things we just remind ourselves, that feeling of fulfillment comes from doing something good for the people around you, whether they know it or acknowledge it or not. I feel like when I come to Craig that there's people that feel that way too.
Yeah. So what brings you or brought you to Craig? Talk a little bit about that.
So my daughter had a spinal cord injury while we were on spring break here in Colorado. And so she was 16 years old at the time. She was kind of emergency transferred to Children's Hospital here in Denver area. And then she was in intensive care for a long time, more than a month. And then another ambulance ride across town. She was transferred here for inpatient and then some outpatient therapy.
Outpatient, and she captured our hearts right away.
Well, she has a way of doing that.
The irony that you have this role as a city manager, and I don't know if Muskogee is city manager form of government.
Yes, it is.
So you run the city. Just for those who don't know, city manager forms of government are where you actually run it. They may have a mayor. Mayor may be part of city council, but the real deal is you.
Yeah, the council and mayor, they're the board of directors, and the mayor's the chairman of the board, but then the person that has to go do everything is me.
It's the city manager, and you've been doing that for over 7 years. I know there are other things that may come up in story as we talk in this next hour, but the irony that the importance of placemaking, I could imagine, took on new importance or even just sort of new perspectives through the lens of Annie's injury. And I'd love just to get some sense of how have your perspectives changed and what stories has just the way that this has personally touched you, how has it changed your perspectives about this whole idea of accessibility and disability rights and city and placemaking?
Well, you're right. I think from my background, from my perspective, it changed dramatically 2 years ago, right? And so I can see the perspective of people that don't understand the challenges. And so one of my perspectives is that I work in a beautiful old city hall that's 100 years old, like literally 100 years old. And they do have an elevator that they didn't originally have. But my daughter is terrified of it because it is just about as wide as it's, probably a 50 or 60 era, well-maintained elevator. But so my daughter used to come to my office a lot, and she doesn't as much anymore because there's that, even though there's an elevator, it's one she can't turn around in. She can wheel in and then have to back out. That's the kind of, and so you don't think about those things. We had, and we do have at the city accommodations for people that can't get upstairs. You can understand from both perspectives, before her injury and after. It's kind of like, different layers that you see, and you're like, oh, okay. The things that I hadn't thought about as far as, the quote that you read earlier, it's not about fairness, it's about equity of access. Well, there's lots of things. The fairness is there's an elevator. The equity of access is that it's not really feasible for people in wheelchairs.
Right.
And so that change of perspective has been, I'll admit, I feel a little guilty that I hadn't thought of those things before, right? I mean, you want to think of yourself as empathetic or caring or trying to help others. And you're like, oh, now it's, more important to me because my daughter's situation, but maybe, it obviously should have been even before that.
Well, I would say I'm here to the extent you need me to absolve you of the guilt. That's why we're talking about this today. is that there's this, what's that phrase? That which has been seen can't be unseen.
Yes.
And I, too, until 5 years ago, sort of considered myself someone who really thought about equity. But I can tell you that the universal we's, haven't thought about it through the lens of accessibility. I could imagine that equity would be Annie could bounce into the building, take the stairs, probably, I hope, unless you're on the millionth floor. In that case, I'd say take the elevator, too. That equity is that how do we make it as easy as possible and as welcoming, whether it's restaurants, where now I can't walk into restaurants without seeing how would a power chair ever get around all these tables.
I had that experience, that exact restaurant experience. My brother and I were going to lunch the other day, and I called my wife and my daughter and said, hey, come join us. And then we got to the restaurant about 5 minutes before, and like, oh, we can't go to this restaurant. It was an older restaurant. It had, flagstone steps. Like, it didn't have a ramp. Like, we hadn't, even still, I hadn't noticed those things. Yeah. So the people that are patients and friends of Craig, I'm not illuminating them by saying those things. But one of the things you said earlier, it reminded me of something that I did learn here that has stuck with me for the 2 years plus since Annie's been gone from the hospital. One of the I don't remember if it was a therapist or one of the people said, go out and try to do stuff, even if it's hard or you can't do it or you need help. And they said, people will not know. If you sit at home and don't try, people will think that you can't or don't want to do that. And it was, I think, maybe about pumping your own gas or like things, daily activities that are harder. Like, figure out how to do these things. And then if you can't, or if there's obstacles in your way, let people try and help you overcome those, either in that day, in that moment, or by design long term. Yeah. And that's I thought of that here because it's hard. I will say, from my daughter's perspective and me being with her, she doesn't want to be that person. She doesn't want to be the center of attention, trying something and not being able to do it, or publicly doing something that takes her 5 or 10 minutes longer than other people, and have people look at her. And she's a teenager anyway,
yes,
right?
Yeah, right. I was going to say some of it is the adolescence. Yeah, absolutely. And it's valid.
And so I learned that here, and it stuck with me.
Well, how has it changed now you're back in your city manager role, putting that hat back on and driving about, walking about, experiencing Muskogee. How has it changed your agenda? How you all do talk about this at council or with the mayor or others?
So we do, and a couple of things that we're doing is just by design on our projects up front, even more so. So you talked about ADA as a necessity, right? Or is it as what you used a good term of phrase?
It's necessary but not sufficient.
Yes,
to really.
So we know when we're designing something what the necessity is. As we're looking at all these projects, we're trying to make sure that we're doing. We didn't have the right words for it, but ADA says this. How do we do better than that? Right.
That's right.
And so we are building. We've had 2 new sidewalk projects in the last year that we made sure we tried to do with that. We had a trail project that I don't want to go into all the details, but we had struggles with a contractor who decided that ADA wasn't necessary, but much yes, necessary. I guess that first bar, let alone sufficient. Yeah. And so we had some trouble with that, and working with some partners, we figured out how to get through that. One thing that I'll say that I've learned from others is, so you ask how it kind of changes the things that we do. My daughter's a freshman at the University of Tulsa. And so she toured a bunch of colleges, as one does before they, make that large decision. And we got to see accessibility from that perspective. And we saw lots of colleges and universities that had the necessary that you could get from point A to point B. But she went to some places that her college tour, they're like, okay, well, you go around back and through the alley.
Good old around back.
And go there, and we'll meet you up over here. And even one of them had, like, here's the welcome hall for the everyone get together. You can't come in the regular door, though, to get to the big welcome for the student orientation, to the recruitment. But when she went to the University of Tulsa, she remarked upon it. She's like, it seems like where their ramps are, right, where the doors are, everything gets me to the same place at the same time as the other people. I can go with my friends from class to class here, right? And we're not having to do the triangulation or I'll see you there.
Yeah.
It's like my destination and theirs is close by, right? And
that's equity.
By design.
You do it, Tulsa. Hats off to Tulsa.
Well, and so that's kind of been a goal for me is as we do new things in our city, how can that be part of it?
Yeah. We've been working with this developer who has gotten religion, I will say, in terms of having come over. We really walk the building in a really specialized, highly targeted tour with our occupational and physical therapists. And one of the things that he realized, which is what I wanted to ask you about, is it actually isn't much more difficult to think about design as you're talking about from the ground up, whether we're talking in commercial spaces, retail, or certainly in our homes. Sure, doors need to be spec'd to be wider, these 36-inch, I think it is, doors, and making sure that you can actually clear turns in hallways and that kind of thing. So what's been, if any, the conversations with your teams or with city council or with the community around what would it take if Tulsa, the university, can do that, to think about our city and our town that way?
The conversations have been, I would say, somewhat organic, in that you just have that when we're talking about a project or talking about building something. One example is a housing group that we're working with. Again, we'll probably not use the exact correct industry terms, but basically they're like, we don't need to design houses that have steps. Everybody's got that little, one or two steps leading up. We got to build the pad up so it doesn't flood. We know that, but so they're building and they're designing. Your path gently slopes up into your home instead of having, steps. And as you were talking earlier, and you have a big open floor plan, and it's not a inconvenience. It's not a lot of additional development cost. It's usually maybe not even more cost. It's less, depending on how they do it in the structure. And so those are the kind of conversations that I am having now that I never would have had before. Is how can we do something that looks good, that is above and beyond what's needed, that is welcoming, and provides a high quality of life, because that's what we're all after anyway, is that high quality of life. And the less you have to think about the daily things, the more you're able to enjoy life.
And even as you said with Annie, that not becoming the center of attention because of the difference in the way of trying to navigate around things, but the center of attention because she's like a rock star, right?
She is pretty great.
Know,
See,
as
everyone
opposed
go watch the video.
Yeah, you should. It's amazing.
I'm sure there's going to be a link in the podcast.
We will make sure there's a link. We talked about this budget thing. I kind of mentioned it. Have you yet come upon the time where you had to think about trade-offs in budgets as in the city, or trade-offs or how you navigate the difficult conversations that you even referenced?
Well, I mean, we're probably in some of those conversations right now. We're in the middle of trying to do a capital campaign. So we're trying to figure out, we've got a bunch of, I alluded to our 100-year-old city hall. So We've got a lot of buildings that need some TLC and that need some repair. And so what does that look like, right? And how much does that cost? And we've got different plans that we could build a whole nother entrance to the building on the east side that would make it truly ADA accessible and compliant, because our current things are kind of grandfathered in, like an old building. And so we could do a whole bunch of that, but that would cost a lot more than if we just, put a new coat of paint on it and, a new roof and, the things that you have to do on a 100-year-old building. And so those are conversations.
Yeah, two things come to mind. The first is, have you run into, which I will tell you just honestly, as an African-American woman who is of a certain age, I've lived through several decades of the work we know we have to do around social justice in whatever way it plays out. And it can sometimes be you have an agenda. You're doing this because you have an agenda, as opposed to this is really good for everybody. I hope you haven't hit that with respect to people thinking, oh, you're just driving this because of Annie. But that this whole opening of eyes around seeing your community very differently, because, mobility challenges are one, but sight challenges are another, cognitive challenges, sensory
absolutely.
neural challenges, it's all in there. So I hope nobody said that to you.
No, and I do want to say again about my community that I think we are in general pretty disability friendly. We are home to the Oklahoma School for the Blind. So you talked about people that have visual challenges, and so we do have a lot of youngsters that are learning how to deal with poor eyesight or no eyesight, and we have white cane days, and we have people, maneuvering downtown with, learning, some basics about how to navigate the world. And so we have a pretty high awareness of trying to make our community accommodating to people who experience life differently than us. It's different now, now that I'm in the seat that I'm in, and now that I'm experiencing life with Annie like I am. So.
And by the way, maybe we all need to take Muskogee's population and double it based on the wonderful ways you're talking about.
We'd love
the
everyone
town.
to move there.
Yeah, it sounds like and really that is progressive to be able to say that you live because of circumstances, i.e. having that school there, for example. Do you think it's easier in small? I don't know how often or how city managers come together nationally but really come together to share.
Yeah, so cities the size of Muskogee have problems that bigger cities have. In Oklahoma, it's Tulsa and Oklahoma City, but we don't have those resources that they have to do it. You get a kind of critical mass of employees and a critical mass of tax dollars. And so I think in some ways harder, maybe in a much smaller town of 5,000 or 10,000 people, you can focus on fewer things that you have to do. In Muskogee, we're kind of a regional hub of Oklahoma. And so we're the biggest fire department for 30, 40 miles. We're the biggest police department for 30 or 40 miles. So we're the one everyone depends on. So we have the extra resources. So we get called upon, our resources get stretched thin to help other communities and other people. And we don't mind that. That's been our identity for 100 plus years. City managers in much larger cities say our resources are stretched too. We have more money and more stretching.
Stretching.
I don't think anything in municipal government is super well funded these days. And so I think we all have our challenges for sure.
We had an issue that happened here in Denver a year ago, 2 years ago now. It was 22. There was for the mayoral election. So it was last year. There was one of those debates where all the a candidate forum, they came together, was hosted in an historical building. And once deemed historical, you can't touch it. And actually, the incident made the front page of the New York Times. You saw that one. Yeah. And one of the good things that came out of it is that legislation has now been passed in both the Senate and the House this year in Colorado that requires that for these political events where there's going to be campaigns, that they have to be held or accommodations need to be made for disabilities. And so, the hard thing is that we do learn this stuff the hard way. How do we use creativity and innovation? And when you dream, what do you see in terms of future cities that you don't even have to think about this stuff?
Wow, what a question. It's almost too big of a question. I get a little choked up.
Yeah.
So probably why you do some of the things you do is you get to make a difference that's important in people's lives. And not just people, but a person that you see, right? And you get to see a lot of great people here every day. And you can see some of them that are just doing way better than they would be doing if it weren't for your help. And so as a city manager, I don't always think of the big thing. It's not been my career. Remember, I was an English major. Right? So I haven't spent a lifetime thinking of what's a utopian city look like. I have spent some time in my life thinking about how do I make that person's life better? But what it means to me is how do we do that on a level that multiplies throughout our community? But how do you encourage them to feel that empathy for the next person and make the next person's life better, knowing that they're not a payoff for me? There's not the payoff is that you did the right thing.
It's those small things that matter, because the grandness of dreaming about big, beautiful cities that have a place for everybody where you really sense and can feel that you belong can feel overwhelming, but it is the small things. It is just, if this helps, Mike, the conversations and the courage of stepping in and looking differently through the lens of Annie's injury at your city and your responsibility around how you make our neighbors' lives better every day. It is a game of inches, and every single one of those inches influences something else. So I just applaud you for continuing to do this work. What advice would you offer to other city managers or leaders who are looking to enhance accessibility within their own communities?
There's kind of philosophical and practical answers to that. And so a practical answer that we've implemented in Muskogee is just using our eyes. And we have a lot of people that are lower income that are disabled as well. And just through circumstance or through inability to find a workplace that is accommodating or all the things that can contribute. And so what we'd found is that there are a significant number of people that had accessibility problems that couldn't get to the store without kind of rolling their wheelchairs in the street. There were people like, we need to do something. So we used our eyes and we built a sidewalk. We're not heroes for that. We could have done that a long time ago. But that is a practical thing, is that you can look through whatever sort of data set that you would like to use to benefit the most people in the most way, in a very fundamental way, because getting to the store to buy food is important. And being able to do that in a safe way is important. And if your community can't do that for people, you're not doing a great job. And we weren't doing a great job, and we're in the process of doing a better job.
That's amazing.
So that's kind of the practical.
I'm going to interrupt you there to say, I love that. Use your eyes. And one of the things that, just to sort of tag on to that or build upon that, is the idea of doing accessibility walks. The bus stop is 15 minutes down the street. There are people who use transportation to get to the office. Depending on the weather, depending on the bus route, depending on the time, can they really make it to that 9 o'clock appointment? And when they don't, are you blaming them? Or are you thinking more broadly about the circumstances? Or is our wayfinding clear in buildings and that sort of thing?
When you're making these decisions, are there people that have that experience at the table, right?
Oh, amen.
Yeah. So are there people that know what you're talking about? We try not to build a park without having, somebody with little kids give us some ideas, right? So we shouldn't try and, build other things. We should include when we're designing things, all the people that might use them and have different perspectives.
We think about, just FYI, in healthcare, when we talk about within our hospitals or offices, a requirement, and it's not a requirement legally yet, and I hope it never has to be, because I hope we just do it, is having patients, real consumers of your services, be part of your advisory committees or your patient safety committee or your quality committee. And what I've heard folks default to is, well, we're patients in this system, so I can represent. No, you can't. We need to totally be able to take our hat off. And so I just love that that's the way you're thinking about it, is that it's a nothing about me without me strategy. As an employer, and you are, if I can just ask that question, as an employer, and I don't know if you know this, but the employment rate for disabled population is about 22.5%. So most people with disabilities have been frozen out of job markets because our eyes aren't open wide enough to see possibility and potential. How do you think about that as an employer? How does the city think about that?
So we are open for business.
Amen.
And, so I think about it with two lenses. And one is, in Oklahoma, the job market is very much employee friendly right now. There's more people that need to hire people than are available in the workforce. And so we have that open door to try and make sure that we don't have things that keep people artificially from receiving jobs. That's a conversation I had this last week with our HR department, is who are we keeping out with our own rules that are our rules that aren't necessary? And that we, especially in an organization that's ours, 100 plus years old, we've got the way we've always done things, and we've always asked these questions. And if you have this, and if you can't do this or that, then you're not eligible. I'm like, so maybe that was a good rule when we had 10 applicants for every job, but now we have, one applicant for every job. So we need to make sure that we are widening our pool, that we are not excluding anyone, that we're not artificially.
Whatever accommodations that And by the way, that's another one of those ADA things that needs work. Reasonable accommodations, reasonable through whose lenses is another thing that we've got to have. It's the opening of eyes.
Wow.
So I'm probably going to make you cry.
Oh, no.
As we finish up this interview.
All right.
Because your daughter, Annie, as we started, is a rock star. And I just want to give you a few moments just to speak into whoever this void is or whoever's out there listening about what a special person she is and why you, through your role as dad and as community member and as city leader, are hell-bent on changing the trajectory around this. So,
my goal is for Annie to have a good career, right? I don't want her to have a 22% chance of being employed. Right?
Yeah.
And so she's got career aspirations and life aspirations and, amazing and brilliant and making all the good grades and playing her musical instruments and performing. And so I'm a proud dad on all of those things, but I have been for 18 years now. So she's really amazing. Everybody thinks their kid's the best, but my kid's the best.
I don't know. We can arm wrestle.
But we've always we've been blessed with her our whole life, and
we got to make a world that is more than big enough for Annie and the Annies of the world. Yeah. And the Anthonys of the world, just like play on an English way of thinking about it. To have that world open to them. And it sounds like were there, and this has just reinforced it, which says a lot about you, Mike, as a person.
Well, she's a fantastic girl, and she's a woman, a fantastic young woman, very smart. And Annie, if you listen to this, I love you very much.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for making time. It's going to be a real honor and privilege to pull this particular episode of Unstoppable through the lens of you guys who place make. And place make and city build and city imagine and city utopian, however we want to put it.
Yes.
And dream big on behalf of those you serve. And Muskogee's blessed to have you, Mike. I hope they know that.
Thank you so much for taking time for me today. I've thoroughly enjoyed becoming, I feel like your friend now.
You are.
Thank you.
You are.